The call came in 2 days after Christmas, the kind of quiet, bitterly cold morning where Spokane felt more like a half-frozen postcard than a city with secrets. I was at my desk in the precinct, finishing paperwork that no one ever wanted to do, when dispatch routed a welfare check. Elderly woman. No answer at her door for 2 days. Neighbors concerned. Routine on the surface, but in my line of work you learn that routine is what people say right before everything changes. Her name was Margaret Whitmore. 78 years old. Widow. Owned a large house on the north side, one of those aging craftsman homes with a yard that used to host neighborhood barbecues but now just held shadows. The neighbor said she was kind, quiet, the type who made cookies for kids even after her own children stopped visiting. They also said something else. She'd been talking a lot about wanting more family around. That she'd been lonely. And that recently some relatives she hadn't seen in years had started showing up at her door. I parked my cruiser outside her place. The house stood too still, no smoke from the chimney, no footprints in the snow leading up to the porch. The kind of silence that presses against your ribs. I knocked, announced myself. Nothing. Circled the perimeter, found the back door locked, windows dark. I called it in, and when my partner arrived we made entry. The smell hit first, not decay, not death, but something stale, like a house abandoned too quickly. Furniture draped with blankets. Lights unplugged. But in the kitchen, there were still dishes in the sink, a teacup half filled with what had long gone cold. Someone had left in a hurry, but not before living here. We cleared room after room until we reached the den. That's where we found the letters. Neat stacks of envelopes tied with ribbon on the coffee table, each one addressed in careful handwriting, to my beloved family. Dozens of them. Some open, some not. I flipped one over, and the words inside made my stomach knot. I don't need much, just your company. I have the house, I have my memories, but I want family again. Please visit more often. I'm updating my will this spring, and I want you all to know that love matters more than money. It was dated just 3 weeks earlier. Something in that moment shifted for me. I've been a cop long enough to recognize when love and money get tangled. People will forgive betrayal, they'll forgive cruelty, but when inheritance is involved, families turn into battlegrounds. The master bedroom told a clearer story. File boxes open on the bed, legal papers scattered like a storm had blown through. A draft of a will unsigned. Assets listed in neat columns. The house, a small investment portfolio, life insurance. Altogether, maybe $500,000. Enough to attract attention. Enough to make families show up with smiles that hid knives. We didn't find Margaret that day. Not in the house, not in the neighborhood. Just those letters, those papers, and a phone ringing endlessly in the hall as relatives called and called. My partner checked the call log. The same 2 numbers over and over. One listed as daughter, Elaine. The other, nephew, Victor. We contacted both. Elaine's voice shook when she answered. She said her mother had been confused lately, maybe depressed. She swore she'd been checking in, but when I pressed for dates, she hesitated. Victor, on the other hand, sounded rehearsed. Too smooth. He said Margaret was fine, that she'd gone to stay with friends, though he couldn't name them. When I asked why he was calling her house so often if he knew where she was, there was a pause. Long enough to tell me I was right to be suspicious. That night, I sat at my desk going through the evidence we'd collected. The unsigned will, the letters begging for family connection, the empty house that looked more staged than abandoned. And one thought stuck with me. Margaret Whitmore wanted love. Her family wanted her estate. Somewhere in that collision she'd disappeared. I didn't know then just how deep the cracks went, or how much blood money could cost. All I knew was this wasn't a welfare check anymore. This was the start of something darker, something that would test whether justice could survive against greed disguised as family loyalty. And for Margaret's sake, I intended to see it through. By morning the snow had crusted over into a skin of ice that broke under boots with a sound like old paper. I went back to Whitmore Street with a thermos of coffee and a thin patience. Welfare checks turn into missing persons when the house talks more than the people do, and Margaret's house wouldn't shut up. Neighbors first. Doorbells, cold porches, the ritual. The retired mailman across the street remembered a white SUV with temporary tags idling on the 22nd around dusk. Young guy. Broad shoulders. Kept telling the old lady, "Aunt Mags, this is for the best." He tapped his own temple. She didn't look confused. She looked mad. The couple next door had a doorbell cam. We watched on a phone while our breath smoked between us. The footage caught audio like it was underwater, but you could hear pieces. Sign. Simple. Durable. I want Elaine. Victor knows what he's doing. The timestamp said 6:41 p.m., December 22nd. Margaret's voice, steady, brittle porcelain. A male voice, patient like a salesman. Then the screen fizzed with snow. The white SUV's rear lights glowed red and the camera timed out. I logged the clip, collected statements, and drove to Elaine's condo. She opened the door with red eyes and perfect mascara, the two rarely traveling together. The place smelled like eucalyptus and staging spray. Boxes labeled kitchen, keep, donate, estate, fragile lined the hallway, each one a little confession. She goes off like this sometimes, Elaine said, pouring delicate tea I didn't drink. Wanders. Friends take her in. She has moods. Which friends? Church ladies, she said, then couldn't name one. And Victor's very involved. He's helpful. Where were you on the 22nd? Here. Wrapping gifts. She gestured at an empty table. We were supposed to do Christmas Eve together. She canceled. She said she had paperwork. I thought, she swallowed. I thought she was finally letting go of the house. It's too much for her. Because you want her somewhere smaller? Because she's lonely, she said, then added, and the property taxes are obscene. On her counter sat a glossy brochure, Cascade Senior Transitions, Compassionate Moves for a New Chapter. A yellow sticky note clung to it, Pioe needed, ask Vic. I photographed it, thanked her for the tea I'd ignored, and left. The church office was warm and smelled like lemon oil. The receptionist knew Margaret by her cookie plates and elbow-squeezing hugs. No retreat, no trip, no friend taking her in, she said. She was here the 20th for carols. She said her family was coming over more and it made her feel useful again. The receptionist made quote marks in the air and looked at me like she wanted me to lie and say everything would be fine. At the bank, the manager knew me by badge and not by name. He set a folder on the glass desk with corporate caution. We flagged some activity, he said. New joint account opened last week, adding a nephew, Victor Haynes. Several cashier's checks drawn to a placement service, Cascade Senior Transitions. He slid me copies. And this is unusual, a request for wire instructions to her brokerage. The email looks coached. Phrases like, as previously advised by my agent. Margaret didn't write like that. Did you call her? She didn't pick up. A man returned my call from her number and said she'd authorized everything. Can you describe his voice? Like he was used to getting what he wanted. I filed an Adult Protective Services referral and pulled pharmacy records. 3 unfilled prescriptions sat in the system like warning lights. Blood pressure, thyroid, a mild anti-anxiety. Last pickup, early December. If Margaret was somewhere being cared for, whoever was caring had sloppy hands. Back at the precinct I spread everything into a grid. The letter stacks, the draft will naming no one yet, the brochure, the bank's copies, the doorbell clip. My phone buzzed with a blocked text. Check your mail. The precinct receptionist brought an envelope addressed to me, block letters with a ruler's edge. Inside, a photocopy of a durable power of attorney naming Victor Haynes as agent. Date, December 23rd. Notary, Kate Dorsey. The stamp looked right until you looked too long. The commission expiration was last year. Sloppy again. I found A.K. Dorsey registered as a mobile notary with a mailbox store on Division. The clerk behind the counter had purple nails and a memory like a ledger. Kara doesn't travel anymore, she said. Knee surgery. Last week some lady tried to get me to stamp something with Kara's expired stamp. I told her no dice. She left mad. Describe her, I said. Pretty. Tired. Brown hair, 40-ish. Drove a Lexus with a dent in the rear. Said her mother was being difficult. The clerk tilted her head. She kept saying, we need this done before Christmas. Like time was a gun. Elaine drove a Lexus. I didn't write it down. I didn't need to. I called the estate attorney whose draft will we found on Margaret's bed. He sounded like he slept in a tie. Ms. Whitmore canceled our December 23rd appointment, he said. A gentleman called to reschedule, introduced himself as her son. She doesn't have a son. He insisted we take care of the power of attorney first. The will can wait. Red flags, Sergeant. I told my assistant to stall and call me if they appeared. They never did. Do you have caller ID? He read me the number. It matched the blocked text's originating line. The storage facility off Nevada smelled like rubber and resignation. The manager liked cops and dull afternoons. I rented to a Victor last week, he said, tapping the ledger with a bitten pencil. Unit 172. Said he was moving Christmas stuff for his aunt. No criminal vibe, but he rushed. People who rush always make me nervous. He glanced at the camera monitor. You want footage, you need a warrant, but if I just happen to rewind to the 22nd and just happen to leave the room, that's me being forgetful. He left and I watched. The screen showed the white SUV with the temp tag rolling up at 7:02 p.m. Victor strode into frame, opened the passenger door. Margaret stepped out. Coat, scarf, hair combed the way older women comb their hair when they want to be seen, not handled. She took one step, stopped, said something that bent Victor's head. He put a hand on her elbow. She pulled away. He didn't squeeze, he guided. That's what abusers call it when there are cameras. He returned alone at 7:26, loaded 3 boxes labeled estate papers, and drove off. I pulled plate info, plate registered to Cascade Senior Transitions, the same name on the cashier's checks and Elaine's brochure. A corporate registry search later, Shell Company P.O. Box, manager listed as a privacy service. But the mailing address for billing? An apartment in Brown's Addition leased by a woman named, of course, Elaine. Paper trails are polite. They let you follow without running. When I stepped out into the cold it felt sharper, like the case had dropped a degree. My phone pinged again. Another blocked text, she's safe. She's loved. Back off and you'll see her after New Year. There was a photo attached. Blurry, indoor light, a hand touching the brim of a wool hat. You could see the corner of Margaret's scarf and part of a face in profile. It might have been her. It might have been any grandmother with a dignity they thought was theirs to manage. I drove back to Whitmore Street because sometimes the house decides when you can go home. The porch light was on now. I hadn't left it that way. The back door, locked yesterday, gave under my hand with a soft scrape. Inside, the air bit my sinuses with bleach and lemon. Someone had wiped counters they had no right to touch. The den's coffee table was cleared. The letters were gone. I stood very still and listened. Houses tell on intruders. Somewhere a heater kicked on. A pipe ticked. Then, under all that, a sound like paper sliding against wood. I followed it to the hallway. The coat closet door was ajar by an inch. When I opened it, an envelope slid and kissed my boot. To the officer, the front read in the same careful handwriting from the letters. I opened it with gloved fingers. Inside was a key on a blue fob and a note. I don't know if I'll be brave later, it said. I am brave now. The key is to where they think I keep my past. Is to where I kept my future. M.W. Underneath, an address for a downtown bank and a box number. Safety deposit. Margaret had left me her spine in 10 words. I pocketed the key, resecured the door, and stepped back into the night. Across the street, the retired mailman stood at his window with the blinds tilted, watching. I gave him a small nod. He raised his coffee mug in reply. In the reflected glass of my cruiser I could see my own face look older than it had last week. Back off, the text had said. I started the car and warmed my hands against the vents. People who say that to cops don't know that telling us to back off is how you make us lean in. Tomorrow I'd be at that bank when the vault opened. Tonight I drove a slow loop past the storage facility, past Elaine's building, past the mailbox store with the expired notary, letting the city draw me a map. Margaret wanted family love. The people who said they were family had learned the shape of her signature before they learned the sound of her voice. They'd made a plan. So had I. The bank manager was polite in that stiff way people get when they're afraid you'll ask them to bend rules. I showed him the key in Margaret's note, explained the missing person report, the forged documents, the suspicious relatives. His eyes softened like he wanted to say, poor lady, but professionalism kept the words locked behind his teeth. We can allow access under exigent circumstances if law enforcement believes someone's safety is at risk, he said finally. He led me through a heavy door, down a corridor that smelled like cold metal and dusted carpet. The vault door yawned open with mechanical groans. Box 314. Blue fob matched perfectly. Inside were folders stacked with care. Not the jumbled mess we'd found in her bedroom but organized, deliberate. Wills drafted at different points, each naming different beneficiaries, none signed. Bank statements. Property deeds. Letters. One envelope was addressed, to whoever comes looking. I opened it right there under the buzzing fluorescent light. Margaret's handwriting again, careful loops, the kind of penmanship drilled in schoolhouses decades ago. They came after Maria died. Elaine said I needed support, Victor said I needed help. I only needed family. I offered tea, stories, photographs. They offered paperwork. Every visit ended with a form, a signature request, a pen pushed into my hand. I pretended confusion so they would think me weak. But I am not weak. If you are reading this, I may be gone. Do not trust Elaine. Do not trust Victor. They say they love me but they only love the house. Protect me from them, or if you cannot, at least tell the truth. My throat tightened. She knew. She had seen through it. And she had still opened her door. That combination, loneliness and hope, is what predators wait for. The box held more. Photographs from her youth, but also new ones. Receipts from Cascade Senior Transitions, copies of text messages she'd printed from her phone. One from Elaine, "Mom, sign the POA and we'll all feel safer." Another from Victor, "Remember, I'm the one who drives you to appointments. Don't make this harder." Each page dated, highlighted, annotated by Margaret herself. Evidence not gathered accidentally but preserved intentionally. And at the bottom of the box, a flash drive taped inside an envelope. Label, December 22nd. The bank manager raised his eyebrows when I sealed it all back into evidence bags. Looks like she was building her own case. She knew what was coming, I said. Back at the precinct, our tech ran the drive. Grainy video but clear enough. It showed Margaret in her living room. Camera angle from a shelf, probably hidden in one of those motion sensor clocks. The date matched the night the SUV was spotted. Elaine and Victor sat across from her. Elaine's voice was sharp, impatient. "You don't understand, Mom. If you don't sign, the state will take everything. Victor can handle this for you." Margaret's voice was steady. "I would rather the state have it than watch my own child beg like a stranger." Victor leaned forward, forcing calm. "No one's begging. But the paperwork needs to be done now. Tomorrow's Christmas weekend. We don't want delays." Margaret shook her head. "Family first, then signatures. You should have come sooner, not just when you smelled inheritance." The video ended abruptly when Victor noticed the clock. He reached toward the lens and the screen went black. I sat back in my chair, jaw tight. Margaret had left a breadcrumb trail for us and it was working. But where was she now? The footage showed her resisting. The text showed pressure. The forged POA showed escalation. We were standing at the cliff edge of coercion. The next step could have been abduction. We pulled financial records again. That new joint account had been drained in 2 withdrawals, both cash, both on the 23rd. Together $20,000. Surveillance still showed Victor at the teller window. No Margaret in sight. A warrant for Elaine's condo came next. We moved in the following afternoon. She opened the door in yoga pants, her face rehearsed into shock. "What is this? What are you doing?" Inside, boxes everywhere. Not moving in boxes but stripping a house, boxes. China sets, framed photos, even the Afghan that neighbors swore always hung on Margaret's couch. Elaine insisted it was on loan. In her bedroom we found a shredder still warm to the touch, confetti of old bills and letters spilling from its mouth. On her desk, a ledger titled "Mom's Estate, Projected Divisions." Elaine's name beside the house, Victor's name beside investments, a line of question marks beside remaining liquid. We cuffed her on suspicion of exploitation of a vulnerable adult. She swore, screamed, cried, collapsed into silence. In the interview room she claimed ignorance. She gave us permission. She wanted us to help. She said so. When confronted with the forged notary, she blinked hard and whispered, "Victor said it would buy us time." Victor meanwhile had vanished. His phone pinged last on the 24th near a cabin outside Cheney, registered to a friend of his. Patrol went out. Cabin empty. Woodstove still warm. A mug of coffee half drunk. Margaret's scarf folded neatly on the couch. That night I sat in my car outside the cabin, heater rattling, snow spitting sideways in the beams. This case wasn't just about paperwork anymore. Margaret had been here. And then she hadn't. A knock on the passenger window startled me. My partner slid in, breath steaming. "Got something?" he said, holding up a plastic bag. Inside, a cell phone, cracked screen half buried in snow near the cabin's shed. We powered it up back at the car. Background photo. Margaret, smiling, holding a birthday cake with candles shaped like a 7 and an 8. Last unlocked messages told the rest. One draft unsent. "If I disappear, know I fought." That draft was timestamped December 24th, 11:42 a.m. After that, silence. I closed my eyes against the glow of the phone. This was no longer about whether Elaine and Victor wanted her estate. It was about whether Margaret Whitmore was alive to claim her own life back. And I wasn't about to let her voice be silenced into just another unsent message. The cabin smelled of ash and fear, the kind of place where secrets cling to the rafters. We swept it methodically, every drawer, every closet, every crawl space. No Margaret. Just the echoes of her presence. A scarf, that phone, the faint impression of her small frame in the couch cushions. Victor had been here and she had been with him. Where he took her next was the question clawing at me. We bagged everything, the mug, the scarf, stray hairs from the pillow. I lingered at the shed out back. Snow covered its roof, but the lock was new and shiny. Inside, garden tools, a tarp folded wrong, and a pair of women's shoes far too small to be Victor's. Mud still clung to the soles. My gut said Margaret had worn them within the week. Back at the precinct, Elaine sat in holding, her yoga pant calm replaced by pacing. She demanded her lawyer, demanded tea, demanded to know when she could go home. I told her one thing: your brother is running. He left your mother's phone behind. Do you know what that means? Her eyes flickered, then smoothed. He's always careless. She probably lost it. But her voice cracked on lost. Her lawyer pulled her out after 48 hours, citing lack of direct evidence of abduction. Paperwork wasn't chains, he said. And he was right for now. But Elaine didn't go far. Surveillance showed her meeting Victor's girlfriend at a diner on Division. They argued. The girlfriend stormed out. 10 minutes later she called us. Her name was Jenna, 25, tired eyes, nicotine fingers. She said Victor had promised her a share if she kept quiet. He said the old lady was stubborn but not to worry. He had a plan to make her see reason. She sipped her coffee like she was trying to swallow regret. Last time I saw her was the 24th. She was alive then. Quiet but alive. Where? I asked. At the cabin. He told me to watch the road while he talked to her. She had a little notebook. Kept writing things down even when he yelled. Like she was making a record. That notebook wasn't in the cabin when we searched. Jenna leaned closer, whispering like the words might burn. He said if she didn't sign, he'd keep her until she did. Said no one cares what happens to old people anyway. She flinched at her own sentence. I didn't think he meant. She didn't finish. With her statement we had probable cause. Warrants went out statewide. Patrols swept the highways. Victor's SUV was spotted near the Idaho border, plates swapped with another vehicle reported stolen from a mall parking lot. Sloppy, desperate. He was running low on time and options. Meanwhile, we dug deeper into Margaret's paper trail. Bank boxes weren't her only insurance. At her church, tucked behind hymnals in the choir loft, we found another envelope. Inside, copies of everything from the safety deposit box, plus that same handwriting: if I go missing, start here. She had anticipated every move they made. Each breadcrumb was her way of screaming without making a sound. The church secretary cried when she handed it over. She told me once, if you ever hear my daughter say I'm confused, know that I'm not. The more I learned about Margaret, the more I felt like she was still with us, guiding us step by step. But evidence doesn't bring people back. On December 29th, a hunter found tire ruts cutting across frozen ground near Turnbull Wildlife Refuge. The tracks led to a shack usually used by rangers. The padlock was broken. Inside, bedding on the floor, empty soup cans, rope, and a small notebook half hidden under a blanket. Margaret's. The pages stopped my breath. She had written daily entries. December 23rd. They want me to sign. I said no. Victor angry. Elaine quiet but watches. December 24th. They moved me. Cabin. Cold. I will not sign. December 25th. He says no Christmas without signatures. I told him Christ was born poor. He slammed the door. December 26th. I hear cars. Maybe they will come. I must be brave. The last page, half torn, scrawled in haste. If you find this, I am still alive. He says tomorrow we go somewhere farther. Please hurry. The date was December 27th. Every minute now mattered. We brought in dogs, swept the area. The trail led north toward I-90. Surveillance picked him up fueling at a gas station in Coeur d'Alene, Margaret visible in the passenger seat, pale but upright. That was December 28th, the last confirmed sighting. We coordinated with Idaho State Police, fanned out along the interstate, motels, truck stops. No luck. It was as if the SUV had melted into the winter roads. That night, I sat in the squad room staring at Margaret's notebook. Her words were brittle but unbroken. She hadn't surrendered. She'd believed someone would come. And that someone was now us. The question wasn't just whether we could find her. It was whether we'd be fast enough to beat Victor's timetable. He wanted the estate. He wanted signatures. And when those failed, I feared he might want silence. The phone on my desk rang just after midnight. An officer on highway patrol, nervous voice. We've got something. Rest stop outside Wallace. Abandoned SUV. Matches the description. Back seats soaked in something dark. We're waiting on you. I drove with the siren cutting holes in the night, praying that darkness wasn't what I thought it was. The rest stop lights threw a hard blue over everything, the kind of glow that makes truth look worse. The SUV sat crooked across two stalls, doors unlocked, winter air slipping in like a thief. The dark, on the back seat looked like a lake in the dim. My stomach made its own conclusions, but conclusions aren't evidence. CSU swabbed, ran a quick Castle, Meyer. No pink bloom. Not blood. The smell should have told me first. Burnt, bitter. They lifted the mat and found a collapsed travel mug, coffee turned molasses, mixed with something slick. The tech rubbed it between gloved fingers. Motor oil, she said. Somebody wanted a scene. On the buckle of the rear seat belt, though, a smear the size of a thumbprint lit up the presumptive. Blood. Real small recent. We worked the cabin with calm hands. Under the passenger seat, a torn blister pack for zip ties. In the map pocket, a brochure for a transitional care facility in Missoula, circled in black pen. In the glove box, a folded paper towel with a shaking hand's ink across it, Psalm 27. I'd seen the note in her choir loft copies. It was Margaret's writing. She'd tucked faith and breadcrumbs in every place she thought we might look. The rest stop custodian met us between vending machines, eyes wide, breath steam white. I saw them earlier, he said, pointing toward the cameras. Old lady with one of those wool hats, gray scarf. Young guy had her by the elbow. Not rough, just steering. She was looking everywhere but at him. How long ago? Hour? Maybe a little more. Before the plow came through. We pulled the footage. The clock ticked back to 12:18 a.m. Victor walked her inside. She moved slow, dignity packed into each step. He took her left out of frame, then came back alone. At 12:31 a.m. white box truck with a Navy star on the door pulled in, no company name, just a DOT number stenciled beneath. Victor spoke to the driver through the window. They opened the rear. The camera didn't see inside. After a minute, Victor guided Margaret out. She paused, turned, just for a heartbeat, her face angled toward the lens. Come. Braver than I've seen most people be. Then she stepped into the dark of the truck. Doors closed. The star rolled east toward the pass. I froze the frame, zoomed the door. .3118723. We sent it to dispatch. The way station logs spit out a hit like they were waiting to be helpful for once. Eastbound at 1:07 a.m., scales at Lookout Pass. Total weight under by 2,000 pounds, empty or light load. The plate traced to a parent company 3 states away, but the cab ID belonged to a local carrier contracting the work. The registered driver, Noel Cortez. 2 priors for falsified logs, a fresh lien. People with debt leased themselves to the wrong friends. I called Montana Highway Patrol and got a captain who woke fast. We can set a stop after St. Regis if he keeps to the interstate, he said. You want us to try before the pass? Before, I said. If Margaret's in the back, I don't want him on a grade with a plan. We pushed an amber-style alert through commercial channels, a courtesy some carriers honor when a driver goes dark. The DOT pinged back with Cortez's last hours of service check. He was already skirting limits. Desperate drivers cut corners. Desperate accomplices cut corners they can't reconstruct later. Back at the SUV, CSU plucked a single gray hair from the headrest and slipped it into an envelope. On the floorboard, a penny scratched across its face lay caught in the carpet fibers. Under it, ink bled through from a torn scrap. Hello. Star. It wasn't much, but Margaret had written the universe into smaller clues. Hello for lookout? Star for the door? She had been writing even after he took her pen. Victor's phone stayed dark, but phones tattle even in silence. We pulled tower dumps near the rest stop. One burner number moved with the SUV for 2 hours and then with the DOT ping east. We asked the carrier for the Sims IMSI, and while legal wrangled, I stared at the map and saw the route he wanted me to see. A legitimate transfer to a facility over state lines where signatures could be coaxed under the word care. Elaine's lawyer left me a message at 2:03 a.m. My client has nothing to do with her brother's flights. She's available for further questions in the morning. He said morning like daylight would wash them clean. At 2:19 a.m., the Montana captain came back on the line. We've got eyes on your star, he said. 2 miles before the St. Regis exit. We're going to light him up. The radio went to static, then chatter. Driver not stopping. I closed my eyes and pictured the road, slick, tight shoulders, the river shrugging along beside it. He's exiting. Crossing the lot. Backing toward the loading bay. The facility in Missoula had a bay door because it bought estate furniture from the families who couldn't be bothered to keep it. Units in position, someone said. Bay doors lifting. Take him, the captain ordered. Tires squealed through my speaker like an animal. Then a voice I didn't know said, "Cap secure." Another, "Backs locked. Seals new." Pause. "We hear something." I realized I'd stopped breathing until I heard the bolt on the box shift and the metal door scream as it rose. "Clear," someone barked. "Clear." Silence. A colder, emptier silence than winter knows. "Back's empty," the captain said, and I tasted pennies. Blankets. A chair. Straps. No person. "Truck driver?" "In custody," he said. "He's shaking. Says he loaded in Wallace. Says he didn't know. Says he drove 30 minutes and stopped at a pull-off because the cargo was banging the wall." Another vehicle pulled behind. They moved the package, paid him cash to go to Missoula and keep his mouth shut if anyone asked. He thought it was drugs. He says he didn't see who took her. He's either lying or he's a coward or both. My partner tapped the screen. Pull-off near the pass could be any turnout. Snowplow cams. We called the DOT night supervisor. He forwarded a montage of plow dash cams like home movies filmed by giants. At 1:32 a.m., one camera caught 2 sets of lights in a chain-up area. The first, our star-marked box truck. The second, a Sprinter van with its rear doors yawning. The image stuttered just enough to keep me angry. The van had a bumper sticker pale and torn, an outline like a bird in flight. Jenna's statement surfaced in my head, Victor's friend who did favors for cash. I pulled her interview file and flipped. There it was. Her roommate worked part-time for a courier, drove a Sprinter, always wore a cap with a white bird. She bragged about odd jobs with Victor. The roommate's name, Nora Keene. We hit records for Nora. 2 traffic citations near the Idaho line. A P.O. box in Spokane. An address in an industrial strip off Sprague, unit leased under a shell linked to, again, Cascade Senior Transitions. The circle kept drawing itself tighter each time. I stared at Margaret's paper towel again. Psalm 27. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. She had written a message to herself and to us. Don't blink. Search warrant for Nora, I said. Now. We rolled out with the kind of purpose you only earn when a clock is on someone else's life. My cruiser's heater fought to keep up. Streetlights slid by like metronomes. In the rear view, the sky was just starting to think about dawn. Somewhere, a woman who wrote her own evidence was counting her breaths and scratching more letters onto whatever paper she could find. When we turned into the industrial strip, everything looked asleep. But a light was on behind a frosted window at Unit C. A shadow moved past like a slow fish. My phone buzzed before I stepped out. A new blocked text. Bring a warrant or bring a shovel, it read. Either way, you're late. Unit C's roll-up door was steel gray, the kind you could dent with your fist but never break through barehanded. The frosted window leaked a jaundiced square of light onto the wet asphalt. We set up quiet, 2 units at the ends of the strip, my partner and I close, warrant already signed and burning a hole in my jacket pocket. The judge had read my affidavit in silence, then underlined Margaret's last note before signing. Sometimes even black-robed men believe in ghosts of the living. We went in hard. Breach kit, barked commands, boots over threshold. The air inside was thick with disinfectant and gasoline, like someone couldn't decide if they were cleaning or burning. 3 partitions of plywood split the warehouse into rough rooms. In the first, mattresses stacked like tombs. In the second, file boxes labeled with surnames I didn't recognize. Other estates, maybe other transitions. In the third, a folding chair bolted to the floor, straps dangling, a basin beneath. No Margaret. But there was sound. A rhythmic tap, faint, irregular. Not footsteps, not machinery. Tap. Pause. Tap tap. My partner tilted his head. Morse, he whispered. He'd done army signals. He mouthed letters as the taps came. We tore down a false wall behind the file boxes and found a crawlspace. Cold air leaked through the seams. The tapping came from beneath the floor. We pried up boards, shone a light. A hatch. Locked. Bolt cutters made short work. Inside, crouched and smaller than she had any right to be, was Margaret Whitmore. Wool hat, scarf, wrists raw where restraints had kissed too tight. Her eyes caught the beam and didn't flinch. She was alive. Ma'am, police, I said, voice softer than I meant. You're safe now. She shook her head once, deliberate. Not safe, she whispered, her voice dust and iron. They'll come back. They wanted the will tonight. We pulled her out, blanket around shoulders, EMTs rushing in with practiced hands. Her notebook was clenched in her fist like scripture. Even with her lips cracked, she said, I wrote it all down. Don't let them say I was confused. I promised her. But the scene wasn't clean. Evidence never is. In a trash bin, CSU pulled half-burned documents, copies of deeds, bank slips, drafts of wills with her signature traced and retraced, practice sheets like children learning cursive. On a workbench, bottles of sedatives labeled under veterinary supply. And on the concrete, shoe prints tracked in with road salt, larger than Nora's size. Victor had been here. We pushed alerts for him. No cell activity, no credit. But his desperation had fingerprints. The van, the facility, the shell companies. CSU cracked the boxes with surnames. Inside were folders, other elderly clients of Cascade Senior Transitions. Notes about assets, properties, family vulnerabilities. It wasn't just Margaret. This was a pipeline. Margaret, warmed in the ambulance, clutched my sleeve. He said even if I lived, he'd bury me in paper. Make me look senile. You must tell them. Her strength was faint, but her will was granite. At the ER, doctors checked her vitals. Dehydrated, bruised but unbroken. When I asked if she wanted to call Elaine, she laughed once, bitter, shook her head. Blood doesn't make family. Actions do. Then she handed me her notebook. Read it. Every page. Then you'll know. I did later in the humming quiet of the precinct. She had written every interaction since December 1st. Dates, times, phrases Victor used. Elaine's exact words, "If you love me, you'll sign." Even details about Nora, the one with the bird on her cap. She knew her mind was sharp and she wanted a record sharper still. Meanwhile, interrogation with Nora went sideways. She swore she only drove, never touched the woman. Victor said it was a family thing. Said she was slipping. I just rented space, no one was supposed to get hurt. But her fingerprints on the straps told different. When pressed, she snapped, "Fine." I held her. She wouldn't sit still. He said if she didn't sign, he'd keep her until she did. That's all I know. All you know, I repeated, is enough for a felony. Her eyes flickered, calculation behind fear. Cut me a deal, I'll give you where he sleeps. We leaned in. He's got another spot, she said. Old motel off Highway 2. Room paid cash. Keeps records there, backups. Says it's leverage in case Elaine bails. We moved before dawn. The motel sagged under years of mildew and neon. Room 6 stank of cigarettes and printer ink. On the table, a laptop still warm, files open. Draft wills, scanned IDs, a list of targets with check marks. Margaret's name at the top. 3 more names beneath, unchecked. The bathroom door was ajar. Empty. The window cracked open. Snow on the sill disturbed by boots heading into the alley. We ran out, flashlights cutting, hearts hammering. Fresh tracks led to the road where tires had churned slush. He was minutes gone. In the room's desk drawer, though, a phone buzzed. Not Victor's, but a burner. Screen lit with an incoming text. Payment ready when signed, doc delivered. End of week. No excuses. Number masked, but area code local. Victor wasn't just freelancing for greed. Someone bigger was paying for paper proof that Margaret had surrendered her estate. A buyer, an enabler, maybe even the architect of Cascade Senior Transitions. Margaret was alive, yes. But the game hadn't ended. They'd lost one pawn, not the board. When I returned to the hospital that night, Margaret was propped against pillows, eyes clear despite the 4. She saw my face and knew. He's not done, is he? No, I admitted. She placed her hand over mine, papery but steady. Then neither am I. For the first time since the call on December 27th, I believed we might win. But winning meant cornering Victor before his paper war buried her for good. The warrant list grew longer. The clock ticked louder. And somewhere in Spokane, Victor Haynes was running out of shadows to hide in. The motel room smelled like betrayal long after CSU packed the laptops and bagged the files. I stood in the doorway staring at the list of names Margaret hadn't seen. 3 more seniors in Spokane, all widowed, all with property. Cascade Senior Transitions had its claws out wider than we thought. Victor wasn't just a desperate son-in-law figure, he was a cog in something bigger, maybe even disposable to whoever sat higher up. We traced the burner's last ping, an industrial park cell tower near the rail yard. Too broad. Too anonymous. My partner reminded me it was New Year's Eve, the city about to drown itself in fireworks and noise. A perfect cover for someone to slip out or slip a body in. Back at the hospital, Margaret insisted on speaking to me without doctors hovering. Her face had color again, her eyes sharp as they had been in every note she wrote. He won't stop until he makes me look senile, she said. That's his weapon, not the ropes. If they can prove I'm confused, then all my writing means nothing. "We've got your words, your videos, your neighbors," I told her. "It'll hold." She shook her head slowly. "They have lawyers. They have friends in banks. They whisper, 'She's old, she doesn't remember.' That's how they win." She pressed her notebook into my hands again. Every time I doubted myself, I wrote it down. "You must keep it safe. Not just for me, for the others." Her certainty settled in my chest like a burden and a vow. That night, fireworks broke over Spokane in drunken blossoms of red and green. Our radios crackled with noise complaints, DUIs, minor crashes. But I kept my focus on the thin thread that was Victor. He had no phone of his own now, no car we could trace. Men like him always reach for two things when cornered: money and family. Family meant Elaine. She was out on bond, staying in her condo under watch. We posted surveillance anyway. At 11:42 p.m. she slipped out the back in a hood pulled low. A rideshare picked her up. We tailed. She didn't go to a party. She went to the rail yard. She got out at a warehouse lit only by sodium lamps, Unit 17 stenciled on the door. She knocked 3 times. The door opened a crack, then wider. She stepped in. We caught the brief silhouette of a man taller than her, broader. Could have been Victor. We held off, called in backup, pulled a warrant for entry. By the time we breached, the warehouse smelled of oil and printer toner. Inside, pallets of paper, stacks of blank birth certificates, state IDs in progress. A forgery mill. Computers still running with templates on screen. But no people. Elaine gone. The man gone. On a desk sat a folder marked W. Inside, drafts of Margaret's will. One naming Elaine as sole heir, one naming Victor, one naming charitable trusts controlled by Cascade. Signatures traced in 3 different pens. The ink still tacky. They were preparing options, whichever angle worked first. And on the floor by the desk, a champagne cork, fresh. They had toasted something before fleeing. By dawn, federal partners joined. Forgery and elder exploitation crosses lines that get the alphabet agencies interested. They warned us the Jenkinses weren't amateurs. They were part of a network laundering estates. "You'll need Margaret," the agent said, "not just as a victim but as a witness. Her testimony could break this open." But keeping Margaret alive and safe until trial was the real war. Hospitals aren't fortresses. Anyone with flowers and fake sympathy can walk in. I requested protective detail. She resisted at first. "I won't live under guard like a criminal," but relented when I told her it wasn't for her safety alone, it was for every name in that file. Meanwhile, Victor surfaced on a traffic cam in Ritzville eastbound. Alone, driving a borrowed sedan registered to Nora's cousin. He was moving away from Spokane, away from family. That didn't fit. Desperate men circle home, they don't flee it. Unless he had something to deliver. We combed the forgery mill again. One hard drive had been hastily yanked, cables left dangling. The agent said, if he took it, he's running to the buyer. Someone's waiting for signed documents. At noon, Elaine called my desk directly. Her voice was flat, rehearsed. "My mother is safe. This has gone too far. Drop the charges and we'll return everything." I let the silence drag. "Elaine, your mother is in protective custody. We have her. We don't need your ransom." Pause. Then she snapped, "If you really had her, you wouldn't be chasing Victor. You'd let him go." And the line clicked dead. I sat there staring at the receiver, mind racing. Elaine had just confirmed more than she meant to. Victor wasn't running alone. He was carrying something they all needed, something she didn't want in our hands. The hard drive maybe. Proof of the network. Or Margaret's forced signatures. Either way, Spokane wasn't just one case anymore. Margaret had pulled back the curtain on an enterprise that fed on the lonely, the widowed, the ones who wanted love more than money. That night, I drove past her house again. The empty windows, the curtains she'd chosen with her own hands. I thought of the notes scattered across her life like breadcrumbs. She had trusted someone would listen. And for now, that someone was me. Victor was hours ahead. Elaine was still inside the city, circling her own schemes. And Margaret, alive but wary, sat waiting for a justice system that too often asked the old to be quiet. I promised her in that hospital room. I'd keep her words alive. And if Victor thought he could vanish into highways and paperwork, he hadn't read the ending she was still writing. Because this story wasn't finished, not until every shadow that called itself family was dragged into the light. Victor didn't get far. Men like him never do. He thought the interstate could erase him, thought the horizon would swallow his trail. But highways remember. Toll cameras, gas receipts, a waitress who noticed a man sweating through his coat in January. By the time he rolled into Missoula, we already had a net around him. He was renting by the week at a budget motel on the edge of town, same chain as before. The desk clerk remembered him fumbling cash, remembered a hard drive case under his arm. We hit the room before dawn. He tried the window again, but this time the snow betrayed him. Slip, stumble, a knee to his back, cuffs cold on his wrists. On the nightstand sat the prize, the missing hard drive. Forensics later showed it was a ledger, the kind criminals never mean to lose. Names, addresses, estates targeted, notes on pressures to apply, loneliness, dementia rumors, debt. Margaret's name crowned the list. 3 others circled beneath, slated for spring. Victor spat bravado and interrogation, but it collapsed fast. I just did the legwork, he said. Elaine called the shots. Cascade just paid us to keep things neat. He leaned forward, eyes wild. You think I wanted this? I was broke. She dangled it. Said families about loyalty. Said Mom owed us for all those years of nothing. I let the silence choke him. He filled it with excuses. It wasn't kidnapping, it was persuasion. She was fine. She wrote things down, didn't she? You can't call that confused. That was his mistake, he admitted, knowing about the notebooks. We'd never told him she'd written them. Elaine tried to run the next night. Packed her Lexus, headed north toward Canada. Troopers stopped her outside Colville. In her trunk, a box of shredded drafts, another set of forged IDs, and a receipt for a storage unit in her name. That unit held estate jewelry, family heirlooms, even Margaret's wedding ring. She hadn't planned to stop at paper. The charges stacked higher than either of them could climb out of: elder exploitation, kidnapping, conspiracy, forgery, wire fraud. The feds took Cascade Senior transitions apart piece by piece. It wasn't just Spokane, they'd hollowed out families in 3 states, leaving elders stripped of property while their relatives pocketed the scraps. Margaret's courage cracked the shell wide open. The trial came fast by court standards. Margaret testified in a steady voice that cut through every lawyer's trick. She read from her notebook, page by page, never faltering. When Elaine's attorney suggested she was confused, she smiled faintly. If I were confused, I would not have written your client's words down as she said them. Word for word. Date and time. The jury watched her, not the lawyers. They believed her. I did too. Victor tried to make a deal mid-trial, turning on Elaine. The jury didn't need it. Guilty on all counts. Both siblings sentenced, not just for what they did to Margaret, but for the dozens of other elders they'd schemed against. Cascade's higher operators went down too, faces pale in the fluorescent glow of federal court. When the gavel fell, Margaret closed her notebook for the last time. She pressed it into my hands outside the courthouse. It belongs to the record now, she said. I only kept it because I was afraid no one would believe me. You were right to keep it, I told her. It saved you. No, she said, voice firm. It saved the others. I was just one of many. Months passed. Spring thawed the sidewalks of Spokane. One afternoon I drove past her house. Curtains open, windows bright. Margaret stood on the porch, watering her plants. She waved when she saw the cruiser, no fear in her posture now, just the calm of a woman who had written herself back into existence. She still lived alone, but she wasn't lonely anymore. Neighbors stopped in, church friends returned. Real family, the kind that isn't written in blood but in kindness, filled her life again. The estate? She set it in trust for a community program to protect elders from exploitation. She told me, no child who loves money more than family should ever inherit both. I've worked dozens of cases that ended in silence, in missing people never found, in families rotting from the inside. But Margaret's story was different. She refused to be silent. She wrote when her voice was taken. She fought when her hands were bound. She made sure her truth outlived their lies. On her mantel now sits a framed page from that notebook, the line she wrote the night before we found her. I am brave now. Whenever I think about the Whitmore case, I remember that page. Not the arrests, not the trials, not even the headlines. Just an elderly woman tapping Morse code under a floor, refusing to surrender to those who called themselves family. Justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with ink pressed into paper by a hand that refuses to shake. Sometimes it comes with a quiet voice telling the court exactly how betrayal sounds. And sometimes it comes with the knowledge that one woman's courage tore a hole in a network that would have kept feeding until nothing was left. Margaret didn't want revenge. She wanted love. In the end, she got something close: respect, truth, and freedom. And for a cop who's seen too many endings without light, that was enough. Case closed.